Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm Keith Buswell, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time just going over my background and what the intent of the channel is. This is actually my first video in the series. Created an intro video. Feel free to go watch that if you want to learn more about what the intent is of this channel. But today's topic is EKS and Amazon services. So I had a conversation this week with one of my prospects, and the conversation came up where they're more right now of a monolith type of architecture running in data centers, but they're on a migration path over to AWS and doing more of a microservices based type of architecture moving over. And they just wanted to understand more some of the relationships that EKS has inside of their environment, inside their AWS account, and then also just its relationship with Kubernetes and the workloads that are running on there. So what I wanted to do is just walk through the Observe platform through that very specific data and just kind of show some of the things that we can do around that and just provide some kind of overview and some of the relationships that that data might have. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually in my environment, and I'm on the dataset graph. And what the dataset graph allows you to do is really kind of a navigational guide in trying to help you understand, hey, what type of data do I have inside of my environment and how is that data related? And so right here, I have my AWS environment. So right down here in the middle is going to be the AWS account information, and all these separate dots around it are just going to be different things that are related inside of AWS. So ECS cluster metrics, S3 buckets, configs, VPC flow logs, all the different things AWS. And then you can see that there's some branches that come down here a little bit further. So leaving some of the EC2 instances, I'm actually running host monitoring on those because I want to know disk capacity, CPU usage at the EC2 instance level. So all those different type of things. But then also if we come up here a little bit more, we can see we have this icon right here, which is our EKS cluster. And that comes over here and is related to our Kubernetes cluster. So if I go click on this right now, what that's going to do for us is it's going to bring over this side panel, and it's going to let us see all the different things that we're just kind of extracting around EKS right now. So we can account ID, the ARN, for example, names, platform versions, things like that. And you're also going to see that there's these foreign key, primary key tags in here as well. And since all of the data that comes into Observe is essentially just going into a single data store, which is on the back end Snowflake tables, is that we're very easily going to be able to relate data together, because there's not a disparate metrics database or logging database or trace database. So it allows us an opportunity to really kind of relate everything together. And one of those ways is via these primary key, foreign key relationships. So if I come over here and open this up, what that's going to do for me is take me to my EKS cluster resource. And what a resource is inside of here is something that has kind of a stateful impact to it. It's something that's like, hey, this EKS cluster, this observed demo cluster, it's always the thing, but things about it change. The version changes, configs change. Maybe we're moving around different availability zones and things like that. So inside of a resource set and Observe, what it's doing is it's showing you state over time. What's its current state? And then I could also maybe come back here. Let's just rewind the clock here a little bit and go past 30 days. And as I do that, we scroll over here, we have our ARN account, all the different things that are going to be relevant about our EKS cluster. And as I come over here, I can actually see it looks like on February 3rd, we had a change that was impacting this resource. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my time scrubber right here and I'm going to start rewinding. And what we're going to see is that some of these fields turned orange. And what that's letting us know is that there was a recent change to that field for this resource. So as I move a little bit further back, we can see that on February 3rd, there was actually a platform version change from EKS 15, and we move forward, it got changed to 16. And as we kind of keep fast forwarding, that starts to turn away. And now that is our current state right now, is that the cluster is active. We're on EKS version 16 and version 124. So resources inside of here are very powerful. We have that temporal aspect of being able to let you know the state over time, especially when we start thinking about EKS and Kubernetes and pods. They have state. Are they running? They not running? What was the different changes and commits that were introduced in the inside of the environment? We're able to show you this thing so you can understand, hey, what did things look like before that change got pushed out, and what do things look like now? So the other thing that's really nice inside of here is if we come to the related tab, related is a way that you can take a look at what you're looking at right now, and you can look upstream and really identify, hey, what are some of the different things that are populating into here that help make this up. So obviously our Kubernetes clusters feeding inside of here and helping make up this resource, EKS node groups, Fargate profiles, and then downstream, it's also populating certain things inside of here that help make up what they are. So IAM roles, account information, stuff like that. So it's just a nice place. You can always kind of understand like, hey, what relations does what I'm looking at right now have inside of my environment? And now let's go back to our dataset graph. So when we're on our EKS cluster, it reached over here and it says, hey, I'm related to a Kubernetes cluster. Makes a lot of sense, right? EKS is just managed Kubernetes inside of AWS. So when I go click on this item over here, same thing's going to happen is it's going to go bring back some of those fields we're extracting and an obvious relationship. The EKS cluster ARN name over here has the foreign key. It's related to that primary key that we saw in the EKS cluster. So just like that, our platform knows that there's a relationship there and it can interact with it. And you can make some really interesting correlations in here because we're doing this. So once again, I'm going to come over here and go open this up. And what that's going to do for us is now let's go back to that related tab. Let's go look at what makes up a Kubernetes cluster. So it's all these different things: API update, container logs, containers, pods, namespaces. All those different things are feeding in here and creating and are related to Kubernetes clusters. And then once again, as we go downstream, we can say that also made up our EKS cluster. So all of these things are related, and you can really understand these things just because you're bringing the data to observe, and we can make those relationships. The other thing that's really powerful is if I go to logs and events right now, Observe understands all of the things that make up a Kubernetes cluster. So for example, right now when I go to first thing logs and events, it's showing me all the container logs. Makes a lot of sense. You'll get container logs, they're related to containers, containers related to pods, pods related to nodes, and so forth. So when I come inside of here and I go to container logs and I click on this drop down, all of the other things that I might want to know about with a Kubernetes cluster are also in here, and I can start interacting with them. So kubestate API events, all of the application logs from the apps that are running inside of my cluster as well. Same thing with web logs, things like container spec. And if I go open something like that up, we're going to be greeted with all of the different pods and things that we might have in here, the image that we'd see on there. And then also we have the spec. Now, I don't have any recent changes inside of here, but one of the things that's really cool about this is if we go highlight the spec, for example, as a matter of fact, I'm going to pick two specs that I know are completely different because they're just running in different containers. But I'm going to go highlight this one and this one below. And very easily, if you're bringing in config type of data into the environment or deployment data, anything that's like, hey, here's a snapshot of what how I want the config to look now. And then when you go push an update, we can track those things. And if I come up here and say, let's go compare those two cells, it's going to let me know right now, like, oh, these are two very different things. So there's 96 differences. But this is a great way where you do have very similar type of specs that you'd be pushing out, and you're making small little changes. And maybe it's like, hey, what happened inside of there? Like, why did things change so much? So what did things look like when it was running at this time, and all the values inside of that spec or config? And here's the update that we pushed, and here's what things look like now. What changed inside of there? And it's going to nicely highlight those items for you. So really powerful. This works great for hashes as well. Bringing in different values, and I can take a hash, go look at like, hey, yeah, these are definitely, something changed inside of here, and able to understand those. Let's go back into container logs. And let's just go interact with this data a little bit. So a lot of the things that you'd be expecting from an observability platform, security data lake, any data lake, I would say for that matter, is I want to be able to go interact with that data and also make it really easy and user-friendly. So for example, I want to just say, hey, go show me any errors, right? Something really easy. I don't know maybe what column that might live in. And it's going to be able to go find that for you, be able to navigate the columns and go figure out what you're looking for. And it goes and highlights all those errors that I'm seeing right now. Very kind of similar. Let's go look for maybe like stack traces. I'm just going to type the word stack right now, and it's going to go do that exact same thing. And now if I go open up one of these logs, I can see I have the entire raw log in front of me, but that looks like a JSON formatted object to me. So I'm going to come over here and switch this from string over to JSON. And what that's done for me is now it's extracted those fields that I had inside there. I've now the span ID, trace ID, the stack trace. So I might want to come over here and say, let's just go extract that field. And just like that, we've been able to create schema from something that wasn't originally there. So, we call this schema on demand in Observe. And now I have all those stack traces listed inside of here. So I could start to leverage this. Maybe I want to go create maybe like a visualization off of this, or, kind of just maybe save this as a report or something. But one of the things that's really nice that I could do with this, I actually have no idea how to consume a stack trace. I'm not a developer by any stretch of the means. So one of the things I might want to do for me personally is I could come over here and say, hey, explain this message to me. And that's going to do is it's going to open up Ollie GPT, which is our embedded LLM that we have inside of the product. That's going to help you really kind of ask questions about our documentation, go run queries and write queries for you if you want to leverage it to do that, or go explain things like error messages to you. So a lot of really cool things that that can do by just saying, hey, go explain this to me, or go write this for me. So kind of really neat. And this one is explaining that stack trace to me in a language that I can understand. At this point, like right now, this could be something that was really useful to me. Maybe this is something I want to save off, or, this is a query that I'm going to run frequently, and I can come save this as a favorite and run this over and over. But maybe I want to do a little bit more troubleshooting. I'm somebody that's like, hey, I see these stack traces that all of a sudden started happening. I have all these errors happening inside of here. So now I have all the pods that these are related to. I might want to go ask some questions about those pods. And remember, we're in container logs. So things that are related to the pod data, not necessarily going to be showing up in the container logs, but our dataset graph had those relationships built. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to my pods and I'm going to say, go bring me back related fields. And what that's going to do is it takes us into a worksheet. And what a worksheet is for us is a playground. This is where you can start doing some troubleshooting. This is where you can create run books and things like that, and share off your work with other coworkers. And what I'll just do is I'll call this Keith's worksheet here really quick. And then now as I save this, all my work inside of here is saved, and this is going to show up under worksheets, something we could reuse over and over if we wanted to. But you could see right here, it's saying, hey, what related fields from the pod data do you want to add? And I'm going to go ask it, hey, go show me, was there any restarts happening? I'm just kind of curious, was there any restarts happening in my pods? And while that does that, I actually want to show you what the worksheet also did for us is it created all these individual cards. So it knows our starting point was the Kubernetes cluster. So it brings that back on the top level card of what we're looking at, my EKS cluster right here. As I scroll down, it says, well, then you started looking at container logs. So it's bringing back all my container logs on the second card. And then on the third card right here, it says, well, here was the search you were doing. You were looking for errors and stacks. So here's all of my troubleshooting workflow that I've done and all the things that I've looked at so far. And as I scroll over, I now have a brand new column called pod restarts. And what's really nice about this doesn't live inside of container logs. So now I have a brand new thing that I could go interact with. And I want to do that one more time. And one thing that's really interesting is that container logs, there's a pretty close relation from container logs to containers to pods, for example. But one not so obvious relationship would be the underlying EC2 infrastructure where this container is running from. So what I want to do is I might want to ask the question, hey, I wonder if maybe the instance these are running on is not something normally that we would provision. And a lot of times I would have to probably like maybe 6 or 7 tabs, one for the pod data, one for EC2 instance types and things I'd be running on. Maybe typically like a lot of different tabs that'd be open to go run a workflow like this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to Node and I'm going to once again say, go bring me back related fields. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here, and this is I'm looking at the node data set within the Kubernetes data set, and I'm just going to say bring me back the OS image, maybe the kernel version, the kubelet version, and now I'm going to go down and it's going to say, well, hey, nodes are also related to instances. They're the EC2 instances. So I'm going to expand that out, and I want to go bring back something like, let's go bring back the instance type, for example. And then see if maybe like that we could do like the state or the IP addresses. Really, you can bring back as much or as little as you want to get the job done. And I might just say the instance ID, for example. And let's go hit apply. And once again, we're bringing into the container logs that I'm looking at data that never existed before inside of the container logs. So not only are we adding schema on read and schema on demand right now, but also we're bringing in data that just doesn't even exist in these logs in the first place and reaching into the dataset graph and able to make some of these contextualization kind of realizations within the data itself. I'm going to do a quick table adjustment here, which is go view. I'm going to turn this into auto detect and get those fields to expand out for us. And now I can see that all of those are running on T3 mediums, it looks like, and I can do some filtering on that. I can see all the pod restart counts. So I might want to go ask, let's go type in restart. Pod restart count, let's say, is greater than 0. I just want to see pods that have been restarting. Sorry about that, did a little fat fingering. Let's go restart, pod restart count greater than 0, and go hit enter. And so what that's going to do for me is now inside of here, I'm now interacting with columns and fields and data that never existed before, and I'm going to go be able to like start doing some correlations. And I can see all of these have been restart 3 times, 2 times, and I could come over here and now take a look and ask the question, what are all the different instance types that these have been running on? And I can say they've all been running on T3 mediums. That maybe to you is something that you would expect, maybe you wouldn't expect, maybe that could be your smoking gun right there. So it's just a really nice way that you're going to be able to bring in additional data and ask some of those questions. One other really powerful thing that I'm bringing inside of this environment is also my commits that are impacting changes and going to bring upon changes to my Kubernetes cluster. So one of the things I could do is I could go to the pods and I can go tell them and ask them, hey, let's go maybe let's go interact with a related data set. And it's going to come over here and say, okay, which one do you want to interact with? Give you some quick links inside of here. But I'm going to go to GraphLink. And what GraphLink's going to do is say, oh, well, tell me what it is that you're looking for a relationship with. And I'm going to say commits. I want to go look at those GitHub commits. And what that's going to do is it's saying, okay, you're looking right now at the cars deployment. So that's the relevant data that you're looking at. And what it's going to go ask me right now is, and I can see this is at 1234 that I'm seeing all these stack traces and things going on in my environment. And as I scroll down to the next card, what it has done for me is it went and brought back my commits that are related to the pods that I'm looking at. And I can see right here at 11, there was a small change to the cache code resolving a memory leak that was published by Tom. And I can also go open this up. And what it's going to do is it's going to take me directly to that commit and the values that were changed inside of there. So now what I could do is I could come up to the top here and I can go share this page out as a URL, and I could say, hey, Tom, here's the troubleshooting workflow that I've seen. We started seeing these stack traces happen, pods are restarting, and I noticed this started happening after you made this small change to cache code this morning. And that's a much easier conversation for me personally to have versus going and just sending it to an entire dev team or engineering team or whatever, is I can actually go interact with that one person. So just a really, really cool way that you're going to be able to do some really nice troubleshooting and make data relate to each other, but then also be able to kind of consolidate and be more narrow focused with the teams that we're interacting with that might have some impact on what we looked at. So some really cool stuff inside of there. I want to do one other thing that maybe is some value right now. Maybe this is something that I want to go save off and make this a run book and maybe just have some variables inside of here. But I also noticed that I had these span IDs and trace IDs that I wanted to extract. So I want to go inside of here, and what I'm going to tell it is go convert that to a JSON. Because essentially what I want to do is I want to go extract those fields. I really don't feel like writing regular expressions and stuff like that to do it. And since it's a nicely formatted JSON object, I can now just come in here and say, let's go extract from JSON. And what that'll do is it'll give you an opportunity here. Let's go extract some of those fields. And what we're going to do right now is go interact with that dataset graph. Let's go build some stuff out inside of there, because maybe there were some of those links that maybe weren't established at first. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go create some of those links right now, with the first one being the session ID. So I actually have user session data coming inside of my environment. And this arbitrary string doesn't really do a whole lot for me. I could probably go plug that into my user session data and it'd take me to the session, but what would be more valuable if this showed up as a username. So what I'm going to do right here is I'm going to do the exact same thing, is go link to another data set. And what I'm going to tell it to do is, let's go bring that back. Let's just say link to another data set. Let's go view more. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it user. And what it's going to say, actually, I have it labeled as session data, user session data. So what that's going to do is it's going to say, okay, well, you just showed me this, this field right here, session ID. Inside of your user session data, what column are you trying to relate it data? And I have it actually named over there session data, session ID as well. And we'll just call this user link. Naming doesn't really matter here too much. I'm just going to hit apply. And what that's going to do is reach into the dataset graph. It's going to go find that user session data. And now instead of some arbitrary number, I now have names that I could use. This is much more useful to me, so I can start to understand the very specific names, the companies, a lot better data versus just some number that I really couldn't use before. And if I go click on this name now, not only is it going to make these links for me, but it's going to go bring back that information. I can now see the company. I can now go actually open this up and go look at, everything that this person has done as well in the other sessions. But just a really nice way we can start linking stuff together. So let's do that one more time. Let's go to trace ID and let's go link to another data set. And in this one, even though I'm clicking on the trace ID, I can actually knock out two birds with one stone here by linking it to my span data, because the span data actually has the trace ID in it as well. So what I'm going to do is say trace ID equals trace ID, the span ID equals span ID. And what we'll do is we'll call this trace link. And once again, naming doesn't really matter too much here. And when we hit apply, instead of just some trace ID that really I couldn't do a whole lot with, I'm going to go add some usefulness to this. And now, sorry, let me extract this out here really quick, is now that went and linked that to my trace and span data. So when I go interact with these now, if I go click on these, it's going to say, oh, yep, here's the operation, here's the parent span, the trace, the service, the namespace, everything about that, the duration of the span. So this is much more useful to me now. And I have an entire troubleshooting workflow all contained right here with some useful links of everything. Come save this off. And now this is something I can repurpose moving forward. So I really found this fascinating when I started leveraging. These aren't really capabilities that I had at my disposal before. So I really enjoyed this. So hopefully this is maybe something you find valuable. Maybe you see this, how it could fit into some of your workflows and maybe make them more efficient. And I hope you enjoyed this. So give it a thumbs and yeah, let me know of any feedback that you might have. Appreciate you watching. Thanks.